Hello, everybody. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio. Jeannie White is the producer and writes the blog, which I highly suggest you read, and Lillian Caldwell is the CEO. Here at Passionate World Talk Radio, we educate, enlighten, and entertain. Folks, just a public service announcement, since it is, I cannot believe, November is more than half over, that it is National Alzheimer's Awareness Month. It is also National Caregiving Month. So if you know a caregiver, please honor them and please show them some kindness, some extra love. They will appreciate it. Folks, I have a very interesting guest with me today. Going to be a different type of topic I think you'll be interested in. My guest is Dr. Kori Novak, who is CEO for a health project of 7 tribes in the Eastern Sierra. Dr. Kori Novak is a renowned researcher and a published author. And Dr. Novak is going to talk about hospice prison. I never heard of it until I met Dr. Novak on LinkedIn. Welcome, Dr. Kori Novak, to Chatting with Betsy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Betsy. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for coming on. Could I call you Kori? I want to call Dr. Novak. Oh, okay,
no,
Kori.
Please.
When people think of hospice, most people know what hospice is. But if you want to explain what hospice is, and I myself never heard of a hospice in prison until I met you, and I'm interested to tell the audience that is new. Did you start that? And whatever else you would like to share about yourself.
Sure. I didn't start it, but so we'll start with hospice. Hospice, if you're not familiar, is the provision of care for individuals who have been diagnosed with something terminal and have 6 months or less in their life. And it is really about palliative care, which is comfort care, not curative care. We're not looking to cure their cancer or their COPD or Alzheimer's disease or whatever they have, but instead to make the last months, weeks of their lives comfortable and in a caring, loving setting. And so it's not about fixing, it's about caring. And hospice can be provided in many different ways. You can get hospice within a hospital system. There are hospices that have places in nursing homes. And then there's home hospice, which is hospice in your own home where the local hospice provides you with everything you need, from the medications to 24-hour nursing phone calls, hospital beds, toilets, shower chairs, pretty much anything you need to make your caregiver and you comfortable as you go through that journey in life. And, you know, that kind of leads me into hospice can be provided anywhere. Like I said, it's about supporting the dying, not trying to fix the dying. And so that includes prisons. And not many people do think about prison hospice. It's not something I started. I wish I could say I did, because that would make me feel amazing about myself, but I did not. There are not very many hospices in prisons, though. There's only about 30 in the United States, and it's really almost the same as the provision of hospice care in other settings, be it at home or in nursing homes or hospitals, except there are a few differences. The volunteers that come to provide the care and the caregivers are other inmates. And these inmates are usually vetted by the program and then taught how to care for the dying. And then, of course, typically there's a built-in caregiver of some sort in non-incarcerated facilities, whether that's a family member or a nurse or somebody that's with the patient, particularly as they go through the final stages of dying. And in prison hospice, that would be their prison family or their prison volunteer who is another inmate. And so there are special rules and regulations around the inmate being allowed to be with the dying no matter what time of night or day it is. Of course, in prison it's very different. You can't just be getting up in the middle of the night and running to somebody's side. There has to be some rules and regulations around that. And so it's a little bit different. But by and large, it's really about teaching people to care for each other. And whether that's teaching a daughter to now care for a mother or father or grandmother or grandfather or sibling or, significant other, it's the same thing, except we're teaching an inmate how to care. And the really exceptional part of that is that a lot of these individuals have never been taught that. They've never understood the difference between good touch and bad touch, or what a hug means, because, a lot of them have had rough lives. And so I have been going into prisons and either setting up new prison hospices based on some that are already in other prisons, or teaching other inmates how to care for each other. And what we've seen is that the act of teaching compassion has significantly changed not only the inmate, but sometimes it can significantly change the whole prison and make the whole prison better. And that's what I did a lot of my doctoral research on, was that culture change. When you teach people to care for each other, how does that change the culture? And on a greater scale, if we're doing that, if we can do that in a prison with people who we know have hurt other people in one way or another, imagine if we were more widespread, teaching compassion and care amongst the non-incarcerated. What a better world truly it could be. And it sounds so rose-colored glasses, create a better world by teaching people to care. But we can see it in a microcosm of prison. When you teach even the hardest people to care, it changes the facility. It makes, we can see, my research showed the trends of once a hospice got started, not only did it cut down on what the taxpayers pay in prisoner health care, which is exorbitant. So not only are we saving taxpayer money, but we are seeing a lower turnover rate in prisons. We're seeing lower violence rates. We're seeing lower inmate-on-inmate conflict. And so it's really amazing that simple, what seems simple, to just teaching people how to, wash the face of somebody who's dying, or the act of quiet caring and holding somebody's hand as they're afraid, can absolutely change a whole huge facility. So I find it very exciting. I think that if more people thought about prisons and thought about people aging and dying in prisons, that they're not all young and beating each other up in the yard and all of that. They are growing old in prison because of the rules and regulations we have in the United States. People are getting life, and they're 20 years old, which means we're going to take care of them for the next 70, 80 years. So why wouldn't we want to decrease the amount that we spend on their health care and increase compassion in the world? So that's really what I'm about. I'm so thankful that there's radio programs like yours, Betsy, or like the network that you're on, that allow me the ability to share this with more people, because it's so important. And it's something that can easily be done to save a lot of money for taxpayers for a little money within the prison healthcare budget. And to be fair, I understand some people don't want to talk about this. They've been touched by violence, and I feel for them too. I have, thankfully, at this point in my life, not been touched by any violent acts to myself or my family. I don't know how I would feel like that. But not every inmate's violent. And as we all know, we change as we age, right? I mean, you're not the same person you were when you're 20 or 30 or 40. And so I always ask people, how would you like to be judged on the worst thing you did on the worst day of your life for the rest of your life? And
That's
people
true.
say, oh my gosh, I've never thought about that. But if you did something heinous when you were 20, chances are you probably wouldn't do that again when you're 60 or 40 even or 50. Now, that's not to say there's not people out there who are sick, who are bad, who are evil. Absolutely there are. But our prisons are full and bursting at the seams, and not everybody is Charles Manson.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Kori, I think what you're doing, it just blew my mind because I never heard of that, hospice in prison. I think it's a great idea because if it changes people, then it's worth it. And I know, people have the attitude, well, they committed a, crime and they might have, been a serial killer. They don't deserve any dignity when they die. But, and I haven't been touched by violence either, and I hope I never am. But I think, everyone at the end of life deserves a way to repent, if you will, and to get that love. A lot of people in prison, as I'm sure you know, Kori, they haven't been loved properly. They were not accepted by their family. That's why they went and joined gangs. And they didn't have a family. They didn't have a family unit. They didn't know what love was, to be accepted. And for them to be able to, love up properly on a human being that's dying, that has to change them. I could definitely see where it could change somebody. I mean, unless, of course, the person is a psychopath or a sociopath, then, of course, they wouldn't even be in that program.
Exactly.
I'm sure. I'm sure that you have to be screened. So I want the public to know that, your psychopaths, your sociopaths, they're not going to be in this program. This is more for your people with lesser charges. And you know what I read, Kori? I just read it today in one of my Alzheimer's groups, which is interesting. There's a lot of people in prison, as you said, they're growing older, that could have some kind of dementia. And there's also people in prison who can have dementia, and that's why they did the crimes that they did. For example, frontal temporal lobe dementia, exposing themselves. They didn't know any better. So that's very interesting.
It's very difficult. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that this month is both Caregiver and Alzheimer's Awareness Month. It's one of the things that I offer, and one of the things that I do is I can go into prisons and not just set up a prison hospice, but I really do specialize in aging in prison and going in and teaching guards or administration some of the early signs of dementia or Alzheimer's disease, because what happens, when you think about prison, it's a very regulated environment. So if they say, hey, inmate Novak, put your shoes on, and for some reason I can't put my shoes on, or I put them on backwards, or they say, Novak, what time is it? And I can't tell them, we know that could be an early sign of Alzheimer's disease, right? You can't tie your shoes, you can't understand the clock. But there, if I'm a guard and I'm saying, Novak, I want you to do this, and I don't do it, I could get in trouble because I'm being insubordinate. And what I'm trying to teach people is, as you're dealing with these older individuals, and by the way, the body tends to age 10 to 15 years faster while you're incarcerated than when you're not incarcerated. So you could be 40 years old and have normal onset of dementia or normal onset of Alzheimer's. It's not necessarily considered early onset because your body may think it's 60 years old or 70 years old or 80 years old. So, what I'm trying to teach some of these inmates or some of these guards and administration is, let's say they don't tell the time. Yes, it could be an aberrant behavior. They could be a jerk, but it also could be that they can't tell. And of course, if they were to say, I don't know, I can't tell time anymore, that makes them possibly a victim in the prison system. If other inmates see that there's a weakness there, they might get taken advantage of. So there's definitely a prison culture of, you can take care of yourself, you don't show weakness. But if you are demented or you're having some issues, you might not be able to show your weaknesses. And so it's very important that we understand that some of these things could be health related, not behavioral related. And teaching these guards and the administration to watch out for that is really important, because if we throw somebody in the hole in solitary for, let's say, 3 months, and they are suffering from dementia, we're just exacerbating that dementia. We're just making it worse. And frankly, the Mandela laws that were put into effect, I think 2016, or Mandela rules is what we call them, would indicate that is cruel and unusual punishment by sticking somebody with a cognitive disorder like that in solitary confinement. But we do it because we don't know, because people don't know those signs of Alzheimer's or of dementias of various types. So it's important that we educate not just the public on people aging and dying in prison, but the employees and the federal workers and the state workers on what that looks like, because we don't want to be in trouble legally for treating inmates in a way that is cruel and unusual. So there's a lot of components to this that people just don't get, they don't think about, they don't understand. And I really, truly feel it's one of my missions in life is to spread the word about these people, about these this underserved population of people. And again, understanding, of course, that not everybody cares. But what I tell everybody is you don't have to care on a humanitarian reason. You can say that these are horrible people and they've done horrible things, and you don't have to like them. But if you like your money, then you should hear what I have to say, because, again, taxpayer dollars, when you have one sick person, it can cost upwards of $160,000, $170,000 plus $1,000 per inmate per year of your tax money. So either way, so don't care about them. Fine, think they're horrible people. But if you like your money and you don't like paying taxes for those horrible people, you should hear what I have to say. And if you are a humanitarian and you care about human beings and you care about how people are treated, you should hear what I have to say. And I've spent a majority of my professional career now doing just that, spreading the word and doing the research behind what I feel, because that gives it credibility. I've done the research. I've been into the prisons. I've talked to the inmates. I continue to do the research as a PhD that backs up a lot of the ideas that are out there, that backs up the caring for each other makes it a better place, that if we have a hospice, it can cut inmate healthcare budgets by almost a third. And that's all real hard data that we have. It's not just Kori Novak out there as somebody who's advocating for inmates. So that's the exciting thing for me, is not only to have that advocating for inmates side and advocating for elders, and really I advocate for elders no matter what, whether they're incarcerated or not incarcerated, but then to know that a lot of what I'm saying has proof. And that's the important thing that people need to understand. This isn't just a fly-by-night bleeding heart Kori running around saying, be kind to these people. It's also MBA, PhD Kori saying, no, here's why. Look at these other sides. So it's important that we all understand that.
I think that's a wonderful work you're doing, Kori. I mean, to go into the prisons, and I never really thought of this before until I read this article, just coincidental this morning, and then talking to you today of educating. I'm all about education, and that's why I had this, one reason why I had this show is to educate others on many different topics, but I never thought of going into prisons and educating the employees there and the prisoners on the early signs of Alzheimer's or other dementias. And you have some valid points. I mean, if someone doesn't know how to tie their shoes or tell time, they could get in trouble for that. They can get picked on by their other inmates, and they also lose their filters as this disease progresses. I know, with my husband, he didn't know what time it was, and he was only 56. So the education is desperately needed in all facets of public life. The prison system, education system, and like nursing home facilities. I do have a question. When a prisoner is in hospice, what happens if they can't be treated in the prison? Do they go to a hospital who has a hospice unit, or does the hospital get a hospice that does 24/7 hospice care?
Well, it depends. If there's some kind of agreement with the prison, then yes, they can move them. But typically, if it's in a hospice in prison, like I said, there's about 30 or 40 of them. There is a special unit within the infirmary where the hospice patients go. If there is no hospice in prison, nothing happens. They die in their cell. And that's the part that just makes me sick to death. I've heard so many stories of inmates who are sick, who are in and out of the infirmary, in and out of the hospital, which again, in and out of the hospital can cost $40,000 or $50,000 in taxpayer money per visit to the hospital. And so they're in and out, in and out, in and out. And of course, hospitals are doing curative care. They're trying to fix whatever it is that is happening to the inmate. So let's say they have COPD, they're doing breathing treatments, they're doing heart resuscitation, even if it's terminal COPD, even if it's terminal cancer, they have to, by our laws, treat that patient with curative care. There is no comfort care. There is no palliative medicine. So if inmate Kori is finally so sick, I've been in and out of the hospital, I've cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxpayer money, I'm about to die, and there's no hospice in my prison, I either die in my prison infirmary or I die in my cell. And that's it. And that's
the reason why I asked that question is because even, out of prison, there are some hospices that they don't have a hospice unit. They will send you to one. And then some do 24/7 care in the home. So I was just wondering if it was like that in the prison system.
No, they just die alone. They just die in the prison.
No.
They don't get moved anywhere. There a lot of people ask me about compassionate release, and I'm not an advocate, but I'm not an advocate for compassionate release. That's just not my area of focus, and there are many wonderful people out there who do focus on that. But I can say about compassionate release, where they would release them either into the care of their own home, their own family, or a nursing home or outside hospice. It doesn't happen very often. It is rare to get compassionate release because there often is such a backlash from communities about why are you releasing this inmate. And again, I get it, and I understand that that can be very scary to people to think they have an inmate or somebody that spent 30 years in prison as their neighbor. But one of the things that I remind people is if they are being compassionately released, if they actually get released, they're so sick at that point they couldn't hurt anybody. They couldn't reoffend because they're that sick. And, hospice, these people are 6 months away from dying as determined by a physician. And, there's always cases where they outlive their 6-month diagnosis, and hooray for them. What happens with anybody in hospice if they outlive their 6-month diagnosis, they go off hospice, and typically end up right back on. There's a very interesting phenomena that happens with hospice. Many times people, when they receive that really wonderful care that hospices give, they tend to rebound a little bit, and they come back from being as sick as they were. But ultimately, a disease progression is disease progression, and they end up, back in the hospice. But the beautiful thing about hospice is if you can get people, if outside and inside, physicians would and clinicians would talk more about it, and it's hard because they take a Hippocratic oath to do no harm, so they're not people that are saying you're going to die, and they want to cure as much as they can until it's absolutely no choice, but they're dying. But unfortunately, by that point, many people get put into hospice and they die within 24 or 48 hours because they're that sick. And that's a shame, because if we could get people into hospice sooner, it makes their quality of life so much better in the time they have left. And both of my parents passed away in hospice care, and their quality of life, their last 6 months was amazing because we could provide that comfort care, and we knew they were going to die. They both had died of different forms of cancer, and we knew the cancer was going to overtake them at some point. And so just being able to spend that time with a loved one is so important. And you're not more than likely going to extend their life by more than, a year or two, even if you did curative care when they're that ill. So it's a really nice option for families to get quality time with their loved ones. And when you're in prison, it's an option not only, again, to save money, but also to allow them some dignity. And I often hear, why give an inmate dignity? Did they give dignity to their victims? Probably not. But it's not up to me as a human being to decide who deserves dignity and who does not, or who deserves to die alone and who does not. In my view, nobody deserves to die alone, no matter what you've done. Like you said, there's always that moment where they may truly feel bad for what they've done. And if they do in that moment, then I want to honor that. And so at the end of the day, even if I'm providing care for somebody who does not deserve it, for somebody who has hurt so many people and never felt remorse, I can still look in the mirror every day and say I did my best to help a fellow human being. If that fellow human being was a bad person, if that fellow human being was bad by my standards or by societal standards, that's not up to me to judge. And what's up to me is how I conduct myself and how I care for other people and teach other people to care. And that's what I live by, not necessarily that I'm going to be their judge and jury, because I'm not. And I just have to do what I feel is right.
Yes, I totally agree. I just think the concept of getting prisoners to just interact in a caring, loving way, which they might not have ever experienced, would be a life-changing experience for them, because they're being taught something that they weren't taught before. And I could really see how it could touch their heart. And I'm sure, as you know, Dr. Kori, that love is such a strong emotion, just like hate is. And I remember a teacher telling me this. He was my high school teacher, and he said, Betsy, there's a fine line between hate and love. Always remember that.
Yep.
So people love with a passion, people hate with a passion. And if we could get, I believe, prisoners to turn their behavior around, if that's possible by caring for another human being in a loving, safe environment, I could see where that could change people. People might think I'm a little cuckoo too, You might think I see the world through rose-colored glasses, but I could see that. When you're brought up in an environment, and I wasn't, but that, your mom, say, was a prostitute, your dad's a drug dealer, how are you going to learn how to connect and love? You're going to grow up fast, and you're not going to grow up properly. People don't choose their environment. And I'm not saying that's an excuse to commit a crime, not at all. But when they don't have the role models, it's very easily to fall that way and, into a life of crime. So I think that your project, or what you're doing, is wonderful. And here on Passion World Talk Radio, we talk about what people think is a taboo. And, that's just the way it is. I talk about what people think are taboo, and I honestly don't care what if I offend people, because these are the things, that's just how I am. I'm a Jersey girl. These are the things that need to be talked about. And, we talk about the taboo on this network, and thank God for Lillian Caldwell, who allows people and gives people an opportunity. Kori, can you tell the audience about your background?
Sure. My background is kind of varied, but I've worked in healthcare for the last about 20 years of my career, doing various things. So I started out in health insurance, working for a large health insurance carrier, which I think was a great thing to give me a real basis of how healthcare works, because it all works on being paid, right? And so health insurance is who pays us. So I started with a big health insurer in California, and at that point realized I wanted to get my MBA, and so I got my MBA from Pepperdine University here in California. And I grew up in Colorado, went to school at the University of Denver, and then moved to California, got my master's degree from Pepperdine University while working at that large health insurer. And then kind of realized that that's at the point when I said, I want to be a gerontologist. I want to care for other people. I'd always sort of had that proclivity as a child and growing up, but didn't really understand that there's a whole industry around aging individuals. And so at that point, I realized what I really wanted to do. So I finished my MBA and started looking to get into working with elders. Worked in a couple different random places. I worked in sports for a while, kind of in my early 20s, which was fun, and Olympic sport and World Cup and auto racing and fun things like that. And then realized, it's time to go back to my first love, which is healthcare. And, helping people, working with race cars. It was a lot of fun, met some great people, and how could I do that? And I always tell people, I'm not smart enough to be a clinician. I'm not smart enough to be a nurse or an MD. So I knew I had to go get my PhD. And when I got my PhD, I really was lucky to be able to focus in on what I loved. And I knew I loved underserved individuals, people who the rest of society likes to forget, which is part of the reason why I got into elder care, because elders are often not respected the way other parts of the world may respect them here in the United States. So I started in elder care, and when I focused in on what I wanted to do my PhD on, I had an experience with seeing hospice in prisons. And I had known after the death of my father that I wanted to do hospice, but I didn't know what that looked like, what that meant. And then when I saw this prisoners of age thing at Alcatraz, I realized that's it. I want to deal with aging prisoners in hospice. And that just kind of was like crystal clear as day. And that's what I wanted to do. So I focused my dissertation on prison hospice. And when I left Capella, where I got my PhD, I went ahead and started my own little consulting, going into prisons and doing just what we've been talking about, teaching them not only how to put a hospice into a prison, but how to determine who needed to be in the hospice and how to determine health care and sort of assisting states and the feds on how to cut down on healthcare costs for the taxpayers. And then my mom got sick. And once my mom got sick, I left that and I came home. I took care of my mom in hospice. And when she passed away, I kind of needed a break from hospice. I'd lost both parents at that point, and I knew myself well enough to know as a caregiver, I needed to take a deep breath and do something else for a few years. So I looked into where could I go, and an opportunity in Indian health popped up, and I worked with a tribe in far, far northern California for a number of years, and then came down to where I am now with 7 different tribes in a consortium healthcare organization in the Eastern Sierras of California. And actually, just recently have decided, it's probably time to get back into hospice. So I actually just within the last week have taken a position with assisted home care and hospice in the Southern California area, so Santa Barbara, West Covina, Thousand Oaks area of Los Angeles. So I'll be doing that again, and then also still working on my prison hospice and working on consulting with different organizations on how to do this, how to train your folks, and just how to do prison hospice in general, as well as doing things like your radio show and podcasts, and really trying to get the word out. I'm doing a couple TED Talks this year, which is very exciting, or this year and early next year, one in Eustis, Florida, and then I'm taping one, since I can't go anywhere because of COVID, for the University of Victoria in Australia, Melbourne, Australia. So I'm really committed to not only practicing what I preach and actually going in and helping run hospices, but also continuing to help create them in prison and incarceration settings, and spreading the word. And, my background really has been just that. I've have 2 wonderful little dogs who just are my saviors when I go home after a rough day. There's nothing better than to have my dogs Abby and Winston come running up to me and excited to see me. And, that's kind of my life. People laugh and they say, what do you do for fun? And I tell them, I write journal articles and I speak at conventions. And they go, really? That's your fun? But I love talking about this. I'm so passionate about hospice and elder care and prison hospice. And it really is what drives me. And my background, I hope that in 10, 20, 30 years when I'm still talking, I can still say my background is prison hospice. My background is, loving the unloved. And that's important to me, and I think it's why I was put on this earth. Besides being a dog mommy, that's what I do, and that's what I do for fun, and that's my whole background.
That is so wonderful, Kori. I could have you on here multiple shows, just like talking about the American Indian healthcare system, and I mean, you're just full of shows. I could see that. And when I see you on the TED Talk, I'm going to say I interviewed her on Chatting with Betsy. I look forward to hearing you on the TED Talk. I would love to do that one of these days myself, but that's a long way off. And how would people reach you, Kori, to find out more about what you do?
They can go to my website, which is www.KoriNovak, and it's KoriNovak.com, and that also has a way to contact me. And really just, I tell all my friends, I'm just one Google search away, because you can pretty much find me and what I do on Google. But yeah, my website's the best way to reach me. It also gives examples of what I've done and talks about prison hospice. And I just encourage everybody to, even if you don't do anything about it, give it some thought. Think about those people aging and dying in prisons, because they at least deserve a thought. And many of them do change. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen white supremacists, hold the hands of their black friend counterpart, whereas in the non-incarcerated world, they probably would have killed each other. But here, they're caring for each other because they've learned what caring means. And so, death doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care about the color of your skin or how much is in your bank account. Death is death. And
That's right.
Nobody should die alone.
Yeah. That's right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Kori Novak, for coming on, chatting with Betsy. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you do. And, folks, if you missed any of this podcast, you could catch it again on Apple, Google, Amazon Music, and wherever you hear podcasts, you'll hear Chatting with Betsy. And please subscribe because it's free and you will hear interesting guests with important information and resources. This is a great topic. I really am so thankful for what you do, Dr. Novak, and for reaching out to this population. And thanks for coming on Chatting with Betsy. I want to thank everyone for listening. And when you hear this podcast, please share it. It might help somebody that you know, might get you thinking. So until we chat again on Chatting with Betsy, be kind. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Be safe. And just, I can't say it enough, just be kind to each other. Show the love. We all need it. Thanks, everybody. Until next time, remember, shine your light and be kind. Bye-bye now. This is Betsy Wurzel, host of Chatting with Betsy and Passionate World Talk Radio. Bye-bye.